Hello, we're Doug and Colleen with Local Water Well Pros, and we're here to answer another water well drilling question for you today. So one of the number one questions, Doug, that we get, I would say of all times, is how much does it cost to drill a well?
Yeah, on a daily.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you want to cover that, Doug? What does it really cost to drill a well?
Sure. My answer is, I don't know what it's going to cost us to drill your well. Okay. Frustrating as it is, there's so many variables. Okay. It's not just depth. It depends on the type of well construction, the type of materials that we use. We use the best, that we possibly can so that you have a well that lasts you a long time. Okay. Includes how far away are you from us? Like if we have to charge a mobilization fee, typically we don't. Where we are, we don't. What are your water needs? Are you a family of 15 or are you a family of 3? Okay. There's so many variables. For us, what we like to do is do some research on your property. So you should give us a call. We'll do some research. We'll come out, do a site visit, determine how much water do you need. We'll look at location, that sort of thing. Okay. That's the best answer I can give you. Is unfortunately we can't give you a straight up number without knowing anything about your property and what your needs are. Right.
So there's no standard rule of thumb, right, when it comes to water well drilling costs. So often people will phone and I'll hear, well, my neighbor's well is this, or my neighbor's well costs, that amount. Yeah. Does that matter? Like what, your neighbor's well, does that really matter? Is that a good comparison as to what it might cost for you to drill a well?
Yes and no. It kind of gives us a ballpark figure in that what type of well construction is involved. If your neighbor has, casing all the way down and in a screen, then that's an overburden well. So we can kind of, give you an estimate based on that. That helps a little bit, but really we've drilled, next to dry holes, that were 10 feet away and found water, very shallow. So, I mean, we don't know. We can't see into the ground, right? So,
right.
Yeah,
right. And also a lot of the information that kind of circulates in neighborhoods is, information that people think are correct, but it may not necessarily be really, correct or legitimate information for an area. I know that sometimes what people think, Doug, is that there's just this big underground lake and you're just going to drill a well and you're going to get water. And, sometimes maybe that's the case in some areas, but not always, not as a rule. In fact, it generally isn't. So what has to happen is basically a little bit of research has to be done online. You're able to gather that data and you're able to really do an assessment of the area for people, aren't you?
Yes. But I mean, a lot of times we've drilled in that area previously, so we have firsthand knowledge. Okay. Sometimes when you go by the online well logs, there are contractors out there that will tell their drillers how deep they need to go regardless of where the water is. Okay. So there are areas on some of the Gulf Islands that every well in that neighborhood is 260 feet. That's not necessarily where the water was at. Right? You know that, Colleen.
So, I know that.
How can you, who's getting a deal there, right? Nobody. Mm-hmm. We want to meet your needs. So that's called deep holing, people, is what it is, right? So the customer says, oh, my neighbor's well is 260 feet. My well is going to be 260 feet. Doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. You may have paid for an extra 100 feet and you don't know it.
Yeah, I know. It's true.
We've drilled lots and lots of wells that were 40 to 60 feet shallower than the neighbor's well. And I'm sure that's what's happened. We'll drill. If you have a large family, we'll drill deeper so that you have more, if the aquifer is still in that depth, we'll drill deeper so you have more water, or recommend. Well, of course, we'll talk about this on our site visit. But if you have 3 people in your home, you don't need 30 gallons a minute, mm-hmm. right?
Right. And then of course, you did mention quality of materials. I just want to touch on that briefly for a moment.
Okay.
And I've seen that too, Doug. I've been in the industry, for 30 years, Vancouver Island, the Fraser Valley. And one thing I do notice is that sometimes a well is just, there's problems with the casing is leaking. And, when the casings start to leak, that's how, if you have a lot of excessive subsurface water, that can easily contaminate a well, and people may not even be aware of that. I think most people in British Columbia have heard of Walkerton. We've all heard the Walkerton story. Residential wells don't kind of come with all the, they're not equipped with all the bells and whistles like, say, a commercial well maybe, or a municipal well, right? But it's extremely important that, that casing is socketed in properly so that we don't have a leaky casing. And it's really important that that casing lasts for a long time.
Yeah.
Or as long as possible. You mentioned quality. Is that kind of where quality of casing comes in?
Sure. Now, it depends on the type of steel and the wall thickness. And as well, it comes down to construction is there are quite a few contractors that only do a single pass weld on there. So there's a gap. So really your casing is not as thick at that weld as it is throughout the solid part of it, right? So and they're in a rush, so they do a single pass, it'll make it to where it needs to go. That's good enough. Out of sight, out of mind. Homeowner doesn't see it. 10, 15 years down the road, now he's got, dirty water washing it as well. Of course, potential contamination, that sort of thing.
Yes. And contamination isn't something that you see.
That's right.
I've worked with thousands of wells, and it doesn't matter the depth of a well. It matters that that well is safe and contaminated water is not entering, because if you have contaminated water entering a well because of a leaky seal or something else is going on down there, it's almost kind of like big old toilet bowl down there. It just takes in everything, doesn't it?
Yeah. And, some of that can be fixed by socketing the casing in deeper. Right. Yeah. And of course, we want to build you the best well. It's going to last a long time. Our estimate may include an extra 20 feet of casing. Okay. And casing in bedrock wells, I'm talking. But you've seen this on the island, Colleen, where the well is drilled in the summer. Homeowners got water. Yeah. They're happy. Winter comes around. All of a sudden their water's, murky, maybe has a bit of a smell to it. And what's happened is in the summer, the driller has socketed the casing in what he determines is good ground. And then right straight below it, he comes into a fracture that doesn't bear water because it's summer, right? Yeah. So if you were to drill that in the winter, you would probably see that and add more casing. So times if that bedrock is broken, we'll put one more piece on there just to make sure things are safe.
And that's one of the other things too, is that's why wet weather drilling, people always think that, drilling in the summer is good. Wet weather drilling could prevent a lot of that, because a lot of those subsurface waters just aren't there in June, July, August, September. No one sees them. And like you say, so, okay, great. Thank you very much. I think the best thing, if somebody needs to know more about the cost of drilling a well, go to our website, take a look at, Vancouver Island welldrilling.com or Fraser Valley welldrilling.com, depending on where your property is located. Either one, and either give us a call, or you can request an online quote. And by submitting enough information, it does give us enough information to kind of write out, enough detail on an estimate for you. Call you back and get a little bit more information if needed. But
yeah, and this will help you with your budget. Of course, like we said, nothing's concrete. We're not sure what's down there, but
right.
Yeah. At least you can budget.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Doug.
Hey, you're welcome.